Hello, people. Old Fogey here from Old Fogey's Finds. I believe I've told you at least once in the past that the name of my channel, Old Fogey's Finds, is because you might not have any idea what you're going to find on it. Another reason for the name is I'm going to show you some things I've found. But today, I find myself thinking about a job I used to have and what happened there. Now, I'm going to have to give a bit of backstory on the outcome of it, and I'm going to do my best to keep this from being a boring thing for you. Going to try to keep your interest. Approximately 20 years ago, actually a little bit over, I took a job on for a company that was just starting a production line to produce dough for a chain of restaurants. Now, when I started the job, they didn't even have walls up for the offices or no carpeting or anything. My job started out being just setting up the machinery for the production of this product and calibrating it, doing the fine tuning, getting the system to work properly. Now, I started out with one supervisor who had been retired and came out of retirement just for this job. He lasted about 6 months and then got tired of the corporate problems he was having as he saw it, or at least that's what he told me. So that was no big deal. In the process of him being in charge, I proved to him my value to the company, and really that wasn't hard with my background, but even that's beside the point. The person that took his place was supposedly a certified electrician. Excuse me, people. One of the machines we had, or actually we had two of them, they washed these trays as they came back from the pizza restaurants. We made the dough for them. It was placed in these trays. They used the dough. They sent them back to be refilled. And these two machines washed those trays. Of course, they had to be pre-soaked, which that was all in one end of the company, but they were pre-soaked, and by the time they got to the tray washers, they scraped out what dough was left in them, stuck to the bottom, and then they run them through these machines that used hot water and chemicals to clean and sanitize them. Now, in the beginning, I was hired and started on the same day as another maintenance tech. I really didn't think much of him, but that's beside the point. He didn't seem to be interested in doing anything but as little as he could and draw a paycheck. But so be it. Now, this one day, one of those tray washing machines broke down. And my colleague was the first one to the job, and he started working on it, trying to get the thing fixed. He worked for about 2.5 days trying to get the machine running. Meanwhile, at least we had the other tray washer to keep us running. But this colleague wasn't able to fix the machine. It was an electrical problem. And our electrician supervisor took over, and he tried for another day and a half to get this machine running, and he was unable to. But since this building and everything was still under construction, there were certified electricians and all that were in the building, and this supervisor contracted them to repair this machine, which it took another day for them to do, which is no big deal. But I knew what the problem was. I figured, okay, same problem's going to happen to this other machine eventually. Which it did. And I was the one that they called when it did fail. I checked it out, saw that the problem was the same one as the one previous, and it was a bit unethical. I had to rewire a few things, but I got that machine running in less than 2 hours. That supervisor of mine didn't much appreciate that. That's beside the point. Production kept on. And as I say, it was a bit unorthodox the way I did it, but I was able to tell my supervisor that we needed such and such parts. And it had to be quick because what I did was not going to last for long. And he understood that. We got the parts, and on downtime, on non-production hours, was able to replace the parts needed and get the thing wired up right. But it wasn't long after that supervisor decided he didn't want to work for this company anymore, and he left, and we got another one. Now, this whole time that I'm working for this company, once we started going and producing a product, we had a production shift leader, a female, and she was the type that used her female wiles to try to get ahead with any company. And she had a thing going with one of the production supervisors. I think this was the second or third supervisor the company had for production. I don't really remember, but that doesn't matter. Now, back to my supervisor. Now, this supervisor that I got after the electrician, he'd worked for other manufacturing companies, some prestigious ones, and he had a pretty good background. But when he was hired in, he found out that I didn't really care for this production shift leader. I don't really recall how that came about, but it did. But because of that, he wound up moving me from the day shift and doing the regular maintenance on the machines to doing more like the 90% of the preventative maintenance on them. Now, like I say, this colleague that I had at the time that didn't really want to do anything, you could find him standing at a desk looking at maintenance manuals or whatever. But he could be there for several hours at a time and never even turn a page. He just looked like he was doing something. Actually, half the time he was standing there sleeping, if you can believe that, but that doesn't matter. At any rate, there was a problem with one of these machines. It was a cylinder that was attached to a hopper that dropped the flour, sugar, and all of that into a mixer to mix the dough. And what it was is bolts, mounting bolts for it, came loose. And they were tightened, and they would evidently so often come loose, mainly because this guy, my colleague, wasn't putting the correct torque on them. Well, he decided to change the bolts because for some reason they kept getting loose. Major problem with that is the bolts that were mounting this thing were metric bolts, metric threads. And he replaced it, all of them, 4 of them, with standard American thread bolts, which were not the same size threads, and it just messed everything up altogether. So every night when I was doing my preventative maintenance, I'd go and I'd tighten these bolts down, make sure everything ran properly, and I kept telling my supervisor that we needed to re-drill these bolt holes and possibly put larger bolts in, but get the threads right. This went on for quite some time. I'd tell my supervisor at least once a week we needed to do this, but nothing ever got done. Well, there's one night when one of the employees had a problem with a tire, and she'd had tires put on by this company, and they just torqued the lug nuts so tight that she couldn't find anybody to break them down. So this one night, now let me back up here. This company had 2 shifts. The first shift was for production. Second shift was for cleaning and sanitizing all the machines used in that production. Now, I tried using what tools I had available at the time to break the lug nuts loose for this employee, and it just wasn't happening. And so I decided to use an impact wrench. Well, we didn't have enough air hose to reach where the closest place where we could park this car. So I made sure all the doors to the production area were closed and all of this, and had this girl bring her car into the shop, and I used my impact wrench to try to break the lug nuts loose. And that didn't work. But in the process of that, my supervisor happened to come into the building, and he decided to use this as a reason to get me written up. Well, I wind up in front of the plant manager, and they're charging me with blatant disregard for company policy. Problem with that is there was no policy governing this in the company policy. But they said because it was a food manufacturing plant, couldn't have had that car in there because the car exhaust and all of this. Many times in the past, we'd had workers from various contractors in that same area with the doors closed and all that, but while production was actually going on. So I'm thinking, you won't talk about blatant disregard for company policy. You show me in the policies where I did something wrong. And on top of that, how about blatant disregard for company policies with a worker having a relationship with their supervisor? Now, at the time, the supervisor I had was dating this production lead person. And he stands up, or he didn't stand up, but he speaks up and says, she's in another department. That's got nothing to do with it. And I looked at him and said, who said I was talking to you? And I told him about how his girlfriend in the past had been known to have relationships with her supervisor, her production supervisor. And at times she'd leave the production floor, go to his office, and be there for an extended length of time. And that some of those times they needed her on the floor for something, and they'd go to the supervisor's office, wouldn't get an answer on the door, and the door was locked. So everybody knew what was going on there. And it just so happened that this girl we're talking about was on vacation at the time. She wound up not coming back. But from that time on, my supervisor made my job a living hell. He wound up trumping up charges to get me fired, which when I was able to talk to HR, company HR headquarters, I actually could have kept my job, but at that point it wasn't worth it, because I knew this supervisor was going to find some way to get me gone, so it didn't really matter. I told HR what was going on the day shift, what I saw coming in, and what was going on, and the whole bit. And man, that supervisor and the other people on the payroll and maintenance, they had a rough time for 4 to 5 months. But at any rate, in the process of this, when they actually got the offices open and manned, so to speak, they needed somebody to clean the building. And my wife at the time was looking for a different job. I told her about the job, and she came to work there, cleaning the offices and all that. Now, she was okay once I was gone, but I told her that since I was the only one actually doing the preventative maintenance, that this machine was going to break down with this problem. The first thing being that cylinder was going to fall off that hopper, so they couldn't distribute the goods like they should be into the mixer. And then I told her the next machine it was going to break down with what problem, and then the next on down the line all the way to the very end. Now, of course, my wife didn't believe me, but she didn't realize how much I knew about these machines. About 2 weeks after I was gone, sure enough, that first machine broke down with the problem I told them it was going to break down, or told her it was going to break down with, because my supervisor wouldn't listen to me about what needed to be done to get it fixed permanently. Well, for close to a year, I've been keeping that thing going. And in less than 2 weeks, that cylinder fell off. They wound up being down for 2.5 weeks in production because my supervisor didn't want to believe what I was telling him, and the other people weren't doing the preventative maintenance necessary. And then the next machine that I told the wife was going to break down with what problem did, because the preventative maintenance wasn't being done properly. And on down the line. So I guess you could put this up to karma gets you. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I didn't make it too boring or anything, but it is what it is. Leave me comments on whether you like the comment or not. You can subscribe to the channel if you wish to. Leave likes or dislikes, whichever you refer to. But I prefer to know if this content is anything you'd like to hear again, because I got a few of these. Other than that, y'all have a good day. Take care. Bye.